They texted you. Maybe it was a simple, "Hey." Maybe it was a long message overflowing with sentiment and subtle hooks, pulling on memories you thought you'd buried. And now, your chest tightens, your mind spins, your fingers hover over the keyboard. Should you reply? Should you ignore it? What if they've changed? What if this is the closure you've been waiting for? Pause. Let's take a step back and ask a bigger question. Why does this moment feel so monumental? Because that message isn't just words on a screen. It's a trigger. It's not just a notification. It's a spark threatening to reignite a fire you worked tirelessly to extinguish. And here's the thing nobody tells you. The real test isn't how fast you respond. It's whether you've truly healed enough to not need to. Most people believe that responding is polite, that silence is cruel, or that maybe, just maybe, this message is a second chance. That's the trap. The mistaken belief that communication always equals progress, that engagement means growth. But what if that text isn't about reconnection at all? What if it's about ego, control, or nostalgia, not love? Here's the truth. The wrong reply can cost you weeks, even months of emotional recovery. One message, one emotional slip, and you're back in a cycle you already escaped. But if you stay with me, if you open your mind to a Stoic perspective, grounded in clarity and inner strength, you'll see the real choice before you, not to reply, but to reclaim. In the next few minutes, I'm going to show you why your silence may be the most powerful response you'll ever give. This isn't ghosting, this isn't revenge. This is about choosing growth over games, peace over power struggles, and wisdom over impulse. We'll break down 6 hard-hitting truths you need to hear before even thinking about responding. Each one rooted in Stoicism, psychology, and hard-earned self-respect. So if you're ready to stop repeating patterns, to rise instead of react, to finally feel free, then don't scroll away. Because the most transformative part? It's coming in the end, and it will shift the way you see yourself. Your healing and that message forever. Ready to reclaim your power? Let's begin. When they're not texting the real you, they want the old version back. Let's cut through the illusion. When that text flashes across your screen, your first instinct might be to believe they're reaching out to the person you've become, the one who's grown, healed, and learned to set boundaries. But the truth, the unflinching truth grounded in Stoicism is this: they're not texting the version of you that exists today. They're reaching for a ghost, the version of you who made their comfort your priority, who sacrificed your peace for their attention, who forgave too quickly and questioned your worth too slowly. Have you ever wondered why their message only appears after your silence has taken root? Why they suddenly remember your name when you've stopped chasing validation? It's not coincidence, it's ego. The kind of ego that panics when it loses access to someone who once orbited its needs. Think deeply. What part of you are they hoping to find on the other side of that text? Is it the one who accepted excuses, who blurred your own boundaries to keep them comfortable, who kept hoping change would come through effort alone? You see, this moment isn't about them reaching forward. It's about them reaching back. Back to a time when you didn't know better. Back to the old emotional agreement where your pain was overlooked, your love was transactional, and your silence was misread as submission. But Stoic relationships are built on clarity, not confusion. On mutual respect, not emotional manipulation. Ask yourself, is this message a bridge or a trap? Does it pull you forward into alignment with your growth or drag you back into an old pattern dressed in new words? What if that text isn't about reconnection at all, but about testing whether you still live at the intersection of hope and history? Because the person who sent it, in most cases, doesn't truly see you. They see what you used to be to them. And that, my friend, is where you must hold the line. The you that evolved through sleepless nights, tear-soaked pillows, and lonely Breakthroughs cannot be the same person who replies out of nostalgia. Growth, real growth, is about letting old versions of ourselves die so the stronger, wiser, more peaceful self can thrive. When you transformed, when you broke the cycle and began honoring your own energy, you became someone they no longer recognize. And that frightens them, not because they lost your presence, but because they lost control. Control is the silent currency of many relationships that lacked true love. And when they sense that the currency is no longer valid, that you no longer trade your peace for their presence, panic sets in. But don't mistake panic for passion. Don't confuse a digital breadcrumb for a heartfelt return. Remember, in Stoicism, we are taught that freedom is found not in external validation, but in the ability to remain unshaken by it. So if their text stirs something in you, pause and observe. Not them, but yourself. What part of you is still tempted to reply? What unmet need are you hoping they'll finally fulfill? Because if it's love you seek, it can't come from the same hands that let you fall. If it's clarity you crave, it won't arrive from the same lips that once delivered chaos. And if it's validation you hunger for, know this: your worth was never meant to be proved in someone else's mirror. This is why Stoic relationships begin with the self, when your peace becomes your priority, not their attention. Ask yourself, are you willing to compromise the future you're building for the illusion of closure? Are you ready to dilute your healing for a conversation that's likely a performance, not a confession? The person they think they're texting no longer exists, and that right there is your power. Because silence, when rooted in self-awareness, is not cold, it's sacred. It says, I respect my growth too much to negotiate it for nostalgia. This is not cruelty, it's clarity. This is not avoidance, it's evolution. They may still have your number, but they no longer have access. Not because you're bitter, but because you're better. Better at recognizing patterns, better at honoring your boundaries, better at remembering what it cost you to forget yourself. You didn't survive those nights of self-doubt and grief just to be dragged back by a 3-word message. And yet, this is where many falter. They confuse the ache of old emotions with a sign from the universe. But Stoicism reminds us that our feelings are not facts. They are weather, passing, shifting, temporary. What endures is our reason, our choices, our boundaries. That text is not a sign, it's a signal. And what it signals is whether you've truly moved forward or merely paused long enough to be tempted back. The difference between emotional regression and emotional maturity often lives in one moment of hesitation, one pause, one breath. This is that moment. This is the test. Will you respond as the old you, desperate, hopeful, emotionally fragile? Or will you stand as the new you, grounded, clear, unshaken? The version of you who no longer needs to be chosen to feel worthy, who no longer needs to be answered to feel seen, who no longer needs to respond to feel powerful. The real flex is silence, not out of spite, but out of sovereignty. And this right now is your sovereignty in action. Stoicism isn't about shutting off emotions, it's about mastering them. It's about understanding that just because a door reopens doesn't mean you should walk through it, especially when you spent so long learning how to build a door of your own. So don't get caught chasing old echoes. Don't let a familiar name on your screen undo the unfamiliar peace in your life. Remember, they didn't text the healed you. They don't even know that person. They texted a version of you that no longer exists. Let that version rest in peace. Let yourself live in it. Because in Stoic relationships, strength isn't measured by who can hold on the longest. It's in who can let go without needing applause. Now ask yourself this. If you reply, are you resurrecting your past or respecting your progress? 2, the message isn't about love, it's about ego. Let's confront something uncomfortable but necessary. When that text from your past shows up, it rarely emerges from a place of pure, unselfish love. It arrives drenched in ego, soaked in unresolved insecurities, and fueled by a need that has more to do with their reflection than your connection. Take a moment and ask yourself, if this message truly came from love, wouldn't it have come when you were still aching, when you were still hoping, when you still believed they'd finally show up for you in a real and meaningful way? Instead, it comes now that you've grown quiet, now that your presence is no longer a guarantee, now that they can feel the absence of your energy. That's not love. That's ego, and Stoicism teaches us to spot the difference. Love is consistent, patient, respectful. It doesn't disappear when it's inconvenient and reappear when it feels forgotten. But ego craves relevance. It can't stand being erased from your story. It panics at the idea that you've moved on, not because you're no longer valuable to them, but because their value was tied to your attention. That's what they're really trying to reclaim, not you, themselves, through your gaze. Let's look deeper. When someone who once neglected you suddenly reaches out, their message often masks an unconscious motive. To check if they still matter, to verify if they can still trigger an emotional response, to confirm whether they still hold any power in your world. This is not connection. This is validation seeking. This is ego repair. And in Stoic relationships, we don't feed ego with our presence. We starve it with our peace. They're not asking, "How are you, really?" They're asking, "Do I still matter to you?" And they're hoping your answer is still yes, because a yes means they're not as forgettable as your silence suggests. This is where emotional maturity steps in. You must ask, what am I really responding to? The words in the message or the feelings they provoke? Are you replying because you believe they've changed, or because you're still secretly hoping they've finally seen your worth? Stoicism reminds us that what lies within our control is our reaction, not their recognition, not their regret, not their remorse. Those things belong to them. Your power is in the pause. It's in choosing not to validate someone who failed to value you when it mattered. That moment when your phone lights up and your heart skips a beat, that's not destiny. That's your nervous system recalling old trauma. That's a phantom limb of emotional attachment, twitching in response to familiarity, not truth. Your body may remember them, but your soul knows better. And here's what many won't admit. When you stop replying, you stop supplying. You stop being the source of reassurance they were never willing to earn. And that silence, that terrifies them, because it tells them the game is over, that they don't get to win by reappearing, that they don't get applause for showing up late. It says, your absence taught me more than your presence ever did. It's a sobering message, one that speaks louder than any reply ever could. This is why silence is so powerful in Stoic relationships. It recenters the energy on you, not them. It shifts the narrative from reaction to reflection, from performance to protection. You're not being cold, you're being clear. You're not avoiding them, you're avoiding the cycle. That cycle where you keep pouring into someone who only shows up when they feel you slipping away. Think back. How many times have you opened that emotional door before, only to find disappointment waiting on the other side? How many times did their words sound right, but their actions betrayed you? If they really saw your worth now, wouldn't their effort reflect it? Wouldn't their message be different, more sincere, more vulnerable, more accountable? But instead, it's vague, it's casual, it's safe. And that tells you everything you need to know. They're not here to reconnect, they're here to reconfirm, to reassert, to reclaim a version of you who still made excuses for their silence. But that version of you has evolved. The one reading this now knows the difference between recognition and re-entry. Just because someone sees your light doesn't mean they deserve to stand in it. Stoicism trains us to detach from illusions and anchor ourselves in what is real now. Your growth, your clarity, your boundaries. You've come too far to trade your peace for an "I miss you" that carries no action behind it. If they truly missed you, they would show it through effort, not emojis, through presence, not punctuation, through real change, not recycled charm. So before you reply, examine your intention. Are you honoring your progress, or are you feeding their ego one last time? Because the minute you respond just to prove you're over them, you've already lost. You've re-entered the performance. You've handed them the power of your reaction. And Stoicism is about reclaiming that power, holding it firmly, silently, without apology. You're not here to convince someone to see you clearly. You're here to see yourself clearly enough that you no longer need to be seen by them. This is your turning point. The moment you refuse to dance to the rhythm of their ego, let them wonder, let them question, let them sit in the silence they created, because your peace, it's no longer a performance, it's a practice, one you've earned, one you protect, one you honor. And if this resonates with you, if you feel the strength in your silence, if you've seen this pattern before and finally recognize it for what it is, then like this video and comment number 1 below to claim your awareness. Let's build a space for clarity, not confusion. A place for Stoic relationships to thrive, and if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button to join a growing community of minds who rise through healing, not hoping. Because you're not just watching a video, you're witnessing your transformation. 3. Your peace is not negotiable. There comes a moment in every person's healing journey where peace becomes non-negotiable, not as a concept, but as a lived practice, an internal threshold you refuse to lower ever again. It doesn't matter how long you loved them, how deeply you were tied to the memories, or how good the highlights reel in your mind still looks. Once you've found even a glimpse of peace after emotional chaos, the cost of re-entering that storm becomes too steep. So when they text you, yes, them, the one who disappeared when you needed clarity, who gave you silence when your heart was screaming, when they suddenly reappear, your instinct might be to reply, to decode, to hope, to dream. But Stoicism challenges you to pause and ask, at what cost? What does it cost to hand your peace back over to someone who didn't know how to hold it when they had it? Your silence, the space you've built for reflection, the nights you spent learning how to sleep again without their presence in your thoughts. That is sacred ground. And once you've tilled that ground, once you've tended to your own emotional garden, you don't just let any visitor trample through because they remembered your name. The text you received, that ping on your phone, it's not harmless. It's a test of whether you've truly recalibrated your sense of self, your emotional reflexes, your identity. Peace is not given. It is earned, maintained, and fiercely defended. And defending it often looks like doing nothing, like not responding, like not rushing to soothe someone who only misses your warmth now that it's no longer available on demand. And yes, that silence may feel foreign, even uncomfortable at first, but it's within that discomfort that your real transformation is forged. Ask yourself this: do you remember what it cost to feel the absence of peace? The sleepless nights, the endless overthinking, the emotional labor of decoding mixed signals and unmet promises. Why would you willingly return to that just because a new message sounds sweeter than the last? Stoic relationships are built on clarity, not chaos, and clarity demands you weigh every interaction against your current emotional integrity. Are you protecting your peace or negotiating it for the possibility of temporary connection? Because if peace is the goal, and it must be for anyone serious about healing, then anything that threatens it becomes an immediate liability. That includes vague messages, half-hearted apologies, and emotionally impulsive texts that appear at midnight, begging for a piece of the new you without earning it. That's not love, that's disruption. That's ego masquerading as vulnerability. That's nostalgia trying to squeeze through the door of your new life. but you're wiser. Now, you know peace isn't the absence of conflict, it's the presence of self-respect. It's the quiet confidence of knowing you no longer need to perform emotional CPR for someone who constantly drained you. It's choosing silence not because you don't have words, but because your energy is too valuable to spend on conversations that lead nowhere. And yes, they may say you've changed, that you've grown distant, that you're cold, but Stoicism reminds us others are not disturbed by our boundaries. They are disturbed by the loss of access to what they once took for granted. Your peace disturbs them because it reflects their chaos. Your silence frustrates them because it denies their ego the validation it craves. But you no longer need to be understood to feel whole. You've realized that understanding yourself is enough. You've redefined your worth outside the context of their opinion. You've stopped giving people the power to disrupt your inner stillness just because they suddenly remembered you exist. This is growth, and growth is often quiet, often uncelebrated, often misunderstood. But it is undeniable, because when peace becomes your standard, your life shifts. You stop tolerating mixed signals. You stop negotiating with inconsistency. You stop mistaking intensity for intimacy. And that is when you truly become free, not from them, but from the pattern of abandoning yourself to keep others comfortable. Peace demands you honor yourself fully, that you say no without guilt, that you let go without closure, that you walk away without dramatics, and when they text, you remember not every message is a call to action. Some are simply echoes of a time when you didn't know your own power, but now you do, now you see clearly. And Stoicism tells us clarity is more valuable than connection when the connection costs your clarity. So protect it, guard it like a sacred flame, because your peace, it's not negotiable, not anymore, not for a memory, not for a moment, not for a maybe. It belongs to you, and no text, no matter how well written, has the right to take it away. 4. This isn't closure, it's a loop. There's a seductive illusion that often accompanies an unexpected message from someone who once broke your heart. The belief that maybe, just maybe, this time it's about closure. That this is the moment they've finally woken up, finally realized what you meant, finally returned not for more of your energy, but to truly apologize, to explain, to mend what they once so carelessly tore. But what if I told you that more often than not, what you think is closure is actually a loop? What if I told you that this message doesn't close the book, it reopens the chapter you already bled to finish? That text is not a conclusion, it's bait. An invitation back into an emotional cycle that depends on your participation to survive. So pause here right now and ask yourself, have they actually changed, or are they just uncomfortable with your distance? Is this message an act of love or a reflex against the discomfort of being forgotten? Because people don't always reach out to reconnect. They often reach out to relieve themselves of guilt, of silence, of the eerie feeling that maybe, just maybe, they don't matter anymore. And you, my friend, have to discern the difference. Closure, real closure, doesn't require their permission. It doesn't arrive wrapped in a late-night apology or a vague message that simply says, "I've been thinking about you." Closure is a decision, not a dialogue. It's a reclaiming of your emotional autonomy. It's realizing that peace is something you build within, not something you beg for from the person who shattered you. In Stoic Relationships, we understand that the self is the only thing we truly own. The rest, reactions, regrets, returns, are external and unreliable. And when someone reappears in your life with no real accountability, no visible transformation, no sign of having done the work, what they offer isn't peace. It's familiarity disguised as healing. Don't fall for it. Don't fall into the loop, because that's exactly what it is, a loop. A repeating cycle where you go from silence to contact to hope to disappointment again and again, until you start to wonder if this cycle is all you're worthy of. But you're not. You were never meant to be a character in someone else's emotional drama. You are not the therapist for someone who refused to face their own dysfunction. You are not the safety net for someone who only jumps when it's convenient. And yet, the moment you respond, the moment you re-engage, you place yourself back in that position, offering energy to a dynamic that hasn't evolved, hasn't matured, hasn't earned a single drop of your attention. You must ask, why now? Why do they reach out when your silence has just started to feel comfortable, when your routine no longer includes their memory, when your growth is finally gaining momentum? It's not because they suddenly remembered who you are. It's because they noticed who you're becoming. And that threatens the version of you they thought they understood. They're not texting to support your growth. They're texting to disrupt it. Because the moment you stopped chasing, the moment you stopped explaining, the moment you stopped reacting, you broke the loop, and nothing disturbs someone addicted to attention like the absence of it. But here's where Stoicism becomes your shield. It teaches us to observe, not absorb, to pause, not plunge, to respond only from reason, not from wounded hope. So observe what's really happening. Absorb nothing that destabilizes your peace. Respond only if it aligns with your higher self, not your hurting self. This is where you must ask the hard questions. Are they reaching out because they've changed, or because they miss who you used to be for them? Are they offering you a future, or dragging you back into a past you barely survived? Is this message the beginning of something healthy, or the continuation of something harmful? Your nervous system may crave contact, but your spirit craves consistency. Your mind may rush to reminisce, but your body remembers the ache, the exhaustion, the confusion. Don't betray your healing for a hit of attention. Don't abandon your progress for the promise of a resolution that may never come. Because real closure is silent. It doesn't beg. It doesn't chase. It doesn't entertain half-hearted efforts. It walks away without slamming the door, because it knows the door was never meant to be reopened. Stoicism reminds us, if you want to break a cycle, you must be willing to be uncomfortable in the silence that follows. That silence, that's not emptiness, that's space. Space to rebuild, to breathe, to become. And the more you honor that space, the more you realize that you never needed their words to close the story. You only needed your decision. Let them text, let them wonder. Let them wrestle with the realization that your silence is not a strategy, it's a signal. A sign that you've finally stepped off the emotional merry-go-round and planted your feet on solid ground. And yes, they may accuse you of playing games, but Stoic relationships are not games. They are grounded, balanced, sovereign. This is your chance to show yourself what love really looks like when it's rooted in self-respect. You've been here before, haven't you? The message, the rush, the fantasy, the fall. But not this time. This time you see it. This time you feel it in your gut, that this message is a test, not a truth. That this loop is an old script, and you are no longer the same character. You've outgrown the role. You've rewritten the ending. You've risen. So if you feel the strength of that silence, if this section speaks to the exact moment you're living through right now, take a second to anchor that feeling. Like this video and comment #1 if you know the loop ends here. And if you're serious about choosing healing over history, hit that subscribe button so we can walk this Stoic journey together. One pause, one breath, one boundary at a time. 5. Your silence is strength, not spite. When someone you once loved reaches out, when their name appears uninvited on your screen, everything in you might scream for resolution, for re-engagement, for reaction. But what if the most powerful thing you can offer in that moment is nothing? Absolutely nothing, not coldness, not bitterness, just silence. The world will tell you silence is passive, even cruel, that to not reply is to ignore, to punish, to control. But Stoicism teaches the opposite. It teaches that silence is not absence but presence. It is presence with oneself, clarity in one's values, and unshakable calm in one's boundaries. Silence is not a weapon, it's a shield. It is the sacred space between stimulus and response where freedom lives. And in Stoic relationships, that space is everything. That moment when you decide whether to react or remain rooted is the birthplace of your strength. So the next time your phone lights up with that familiar name, ask yourself, are you holding back to be petty, or are you holding space for your own peace? The answer matters, because when your silence is rooted in healing, in growth, in inner peace, it becomes a declaration. It says, I no longer perform for closure. I no longer explain my worth. I no longer give my attention to confusion. And that is not spite. That is strength. Real strength. The kind that doesn't need to announce itself, because its presence is felt in your stillness. When you've done the work, sat with the pain, confronted your patterns, built new boundaries, you begin to realize that not every message requires your participation. Not every opening is an invitation. Not every hand that reaches out deserves to be held. Some hands just want to test if you're still within reach. Some voices just want to see if they can still echo in your mind. But Stoicism whispers, be still, observe. What do you gain by re-entering that dynamic? What do you risk by remaining silent? Often, we think our silence will be misunderstood. We worry that they'll think we don't care, that we've become cold or distant. But here's the truth. People who genuinely care don't wait for silence to understand your value. They don't show up only when your energy is no longer accessible. They don't seek contact only when your absence becomes inconvenient. Your silence is not their problem, it's their reflection. A mirror showing them that their prior access to you was a privilege, not a promise. And if that makes them uncomfortable, so be it. Discomfort is the beginning of awareness, and if they truly seek growth, they will sit with that discomfort long, enough to confront their own role in your silence. But you no longer carry that responsibility. You've learned that your emotional energy is not a public resource. It's not something to be mined by every curious ex, every lonely night texter, every guilty conscience that resurfaces when nostalgia hits. Your energy is yours. And when you choose to keep it, when you decide that not responding is the highest form of self-respect, you are not playing a game. You are practicing self-governance. You are mastering the art of not reacting. You are living out the core of Stoicism. The true power is the ability to remain unshaken by that which does not align with your peace. There's nothing petty about that. There's nothing spiteful. In choosing silence when noise has done nothing but deplete you, it takes far more courage to stay quiet in your knowing than to lash out in your emotion. Because let's be honest, responding would feel good for a moment. It would give you the last word. It might even give you a temporary rush of validation. But then what? What happens after you reply, only to find yourself waiting for a response that never comes? Or worse, getting pulled into another spiral of half-hearted conversations and emotional ambiguity. Silence saves you from that. It saves you from performing for people who already had their chance to choose you and didn't. It protects your peace from people who now want to test its boundaries. And it affirms that your growth is not for show, it's for you. You don't have to explain it. You don't have to prove it, you just have to live it. That's what Stoic relationships are built upon. Mutual respect, clear boundaries, emotional discipline. Not grand gestures, not last-minute messages, not ego-driven drama masked as connection. So when they text and you choose silence, know that you are not being harsh. You are being whole. You are being honest with yourself about what you need, what you value, and what you're no longer willing to sacrifice. And if they truly cared, if they truly saw you, they would have said something when you were still hurting, not when you finally healed. They would have shown up when you were still vulnerable, not now when your strength makes you harder to manipulate. Your silence is not revenge, it's a release from the cycle of hoping, explaining, proving, a release from the emotional taxation of justifying your pain to people who made you feel invisible, a release from the illusion that love must always end with words. Sometimes love ends with silence, and that silence speaks more loudly than any message ever could. It says, "I've changed. I've chosen myself. I've outgrown the need to be understood by people who didn't care to listen the first time." That's not anger, that's alignment. That's living in accordance with the kind of life and love you now know you deserve. It's embracing the principle of Stoicism that tells us our highest power lies in choosing what we engage with. And if engagement threatens your peace, it is not worth your time. So next time you feel the urge to respond just to be heard, ask yourself, do I need them to understand, or do I simply need to trust myself? Because trusting yourself is the foundation of strength. And strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's still. Sometimes it looks like reading the message, putting the phone down, and walking away with your dignity intact and your peace unshaken. 6. Not every door should reopen. There's a seductive comfort in the past, especially when it knocks gently in the form of a text that simply says, "Hey," or "I've been thinking about you." It's soft, disarming, and familiar. And for a moment, your heart may want to believe this message is a sign, a miracle, a second chance. But pause, breathe, and return to the truth you've built. Because not every door that reopens should be walked through. In fact, some doors are meant to stay closed, not because what lies behind them was all bad, but because what lies ahead of you is finally good. It's easy to forget that growth often looks like saying no to things that once felt like everything. But in Stoicism, we learn to prioritize what supports our long-term peace over what satisfies short-term emotion. So ask yourself, when they text you now, when they gently push open that emotional door with a seemingly harmless message, are they seeking to re-enter your life? Or are they merely testing the lock? The difference matters, because someone genuinely seeking reconnection doesn't just open the door, they step through with presence, accountability, and change. But someone testing the lock, they're checking if you're still there, if you still feel, if they still have access. And Stoic relationships aren't built on access, they're built on intention. If their only effort is a text, if their only gesture is a sentence, if their only plan is to see if you'll reply, then that's not love. That's curiosity, and curiosity alone should never be the currency for re-entry into your life. Consider how far you've come. You've spent time rebuilding your identity, not around their presence, but around your principles. You've unlearned the chaos, the guessing games, the mixed signals. You've replaced overthinking with clarity, replaced anxiety with boundaries, replaced dependency with self-respect. Why would you trade all of that for a moment of false hope? Why would you unbolt the door you finally secured just because they decided it was time to revisit what they abandoned? Healing doesn't mean you have to keep proving your growth by re-engaging the people who caused the pain. Healing means you have the courage to close the door fully, even if part of your heart still wonders, what if? And here's a sobering truth. What if is often the chain that binds us to our past. But Stoicism teaches us to anchor in what is, not in what if, what is true now. You're not the same person who once waited by the phone. You're not the same person who made excuses for their silence. You're not the same person who mistook emotional crumbs for a full meal. You've evolved. You've become intentional. You've become sovereign. And in that evolution, you've discovered that not all open doors lead somewhere better. Some doors just lead back into the rooms you once fought to escape. You owe it to yourself to protect your new space, the one built from sleepless nights of reflection, from hard conversations with yourself, from choosing to stay alone rather than stay confused. That's sacred space, that's earned stillness, that's the home of your healed self. Don't invite ghosts into it, because ghosts don't want to build. They haunt, they linger, they disrupt. And you are not haunted, you are healing, you are rising. And rising requires discernment. Stoicism is not about closing your heart forever. It's about opening it with wisdom. It's about recognizing that love without consistency isn't love, it's chaos. That attention without action isn't investment, it's impulse. That messages without meaning are not signs, they're noise. So when they reach out and try to walk back through a door you once left open, you ask, has anything changed? Not their words, but their actions. Not their timing, but their truth. Not their feelings, but their follow-through. And if nothing has changed, then your response should reflect that. Because change doesn't live in words. It lives in repetition. It lives in who shows up consistently, not who checks in occasionally. And you didn't do all this work, didn't fight through all those internal battles, just to end up at the same emotional starting point with someone who only remembered your value when they lost it. Let that door stay closed. Let them walk past it. Let them wonder what's behind it. Because what's behind it now isn't pain, it's peace. And not everyone deserves to witness the peace you've cultivated. That's not harsh. That's honest, that's healing, that's stoicism in practice. And if hearing this stirs something in you, if you feel the tension of a door you've been tempted to reopen, but deep down know you shouldn't, then you already have your answer. And if you found strength in that realization, strength in your silence, strength in protecting your future from your past, then like this video and comment number 1 below to stand firm in your growth. And don't forget to subscribe. Because this space, this channel, is where we grow together, deliberately, clearly, and with a commitment to building stoic relationships that reflect our deepest values, not our passing emotions. You've come this far, not just in reading this piece, but in your journey, your transformation, your decision to no longer allow your emotional peace to be dictated by a sudden message, a fleeting impulse, or the unresolved presence of someone from your past. This is the moment where everything shifts, not because they texted you, but because you finally see the text for what it truly is. Not an invitation, but a mirror. A mirror showing you how far you've come and how far you're willing to go to protect the version of yourself that chose healing over hoping, clarity over chaos, and self-respect over self-abandonment. And yes, it's tempting. The past has a way of wrapping itself in nostalgia, of rewriting itself in softer tones and blurred edges. But Stoicism doesn't romanticize what was, it deals with what is. What is real is the you that now stands. Stronger, more grounded, less available to emotional volatility. What is real is the inner stillness you've cultivated, not because life gave you peace, but because you fought for it. You earned it by walking through heartbreak without losing your dignity, by facing your fears of being alone without giving in to the need for temporary company. What is real is that your healing has made you discerning. You no longer jump at every chance to feel noticed. You no longer shrink yourself to remain loved. You no longer open your door just because someone knocked. That's not ego. That's growth. That's what Stoic relationships require, the maturity to differentiate between attraction and alignment, between familiarity and fit, between attention and actual commitment. Because not every text is a signal from the universe. Some are simply the sound of old patterns trying to reassert themselves. And it's in that very moment, when you choose not to respond, not out of coldness, but out of consciousness, that you reclaim not just your peace, but your power. You begin to realize that you are not here to fix, to rescue, to reopen emotional contracts that should have been voided long ago. You are here to build a future that reflects who you are now, not who you were when you accepted less. A future where silence is not empty, it's sacred, where boundaries are not walls. They are bridges to a life where you are no longer weighed down by the need to prove your worth to someone who couldn't see it when it was given freely. The old you would have replied quickly, hoping to be chosen, to be understood, to finally feel seen. But the healed you has chosen peace over performance. You've seen what happens when you chase closure. It never satisfies. You felt what it costs to constantly explain yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you. And you've learned that no amount of texting, talking, or trying can make someone value what they're not prepared to respect. So now, you protect your energy like it's your lifeblood. Because it is. You don't pour into situations that leave you empty. You don't entertain distractions that masquerade as opportunities. You don't dance with the ghosts of people who only show up when they feel your absence louder than your presence. That's not rudeness, that's responsibility to yourself, your growth, and your future. And yes, some people will misunderstand your silence. They will project their own discomfort, call you heartless, or accuse you of playing games. But Stoicism teaches us to remain anchored in our truth, to not be swayed by the noise of those who never sat through our silence. They didn't walk with you in the nights you cried yourself to sleep. They didn't hold you when you doubted whether you'd ever feel whole again. They weren't there when you finally began to breathe without the weight of needing to be loved by someone else. So they don't get to define what your silence means. Only you do, and if your silence means safety, clarity, boundaries, self-respect, then let it be loud. Let it be final. Let it be the answer that echoes with more strength than any explanation ever could. Because you are not obligated to relive old stories just because someone else is finally ready to revisit them. You are allowed to outgrow people. You are allowed to be unreachable to the version of them that once knew you. And you are allowed to build a life so peaceful that not even the temptation of the past can shake it. That's the essence of Stoicism, not cold detachment, but conscious discipline, not heartlessness, but heart protection, not rejection, but redirection, away from what drains you and toward what sustains you. You now see that silence is not a pause, it's a path that leads away from emotional loops and toward emotional liberation. A path where your worth is not defined by who texts you back, but by who you allow to stay in your sacred space. A path that makes room not for anyone, but only for those who show up with consistency, integrity, and genuine intention. And when you walk that path, calm, clear, and unshaken, you don't just honor your healing, you become the evidence that it worked. So, if you're here at this point, it means something deep within you already knows. Not replying is not the end of something. It's the beginning of everything you've been waiting for, the beginning of a life built on peace, truth, and unwavering self-worth. This is your moment, not to go back, not to stay stuck, but to rise. Because your silence, it's not absence, it's presence, fully present with who you've become and fiercely committed to never abandoning that version of you again.